Now read this. Hello and welcome back to Now Read This, the story of King Arthur and his knights by Howard Pyle, Chapter 4. What befell Sir Accolon, and how King Arthur fought in a fair at arms with swords, and how he came nigh to losing his life thereby. Here followeth the account of what happened unto Sir Accolon the morning after he went aboard that magic ship with King Arthur as aforetold. Now when Sir Accolon awoke from that same sleep, it was with him as it had been with King Arthur, for at first he wist not whether he was still asleep and dreaming, or whether he was awake. For lo, he found himself to be lying beside a marble basin of clear water that gushed up very high from a silver tube, and he perceived that not far from this fountain was a large pavilion of party-coloured silk which stood upon the borders of a fair meadow of grass. So Sir Accolon was altogether astonished to find himself in this place when he had fallen asleep on board that ship, wherefore he was afraid that all this was the fruit of some very evil spell. So he crossed himself and said, God save King Arthur from any harm, for it seems to me that those damsels upon that ship have wrought some magic upon us for to separate us the one from the other. So saying, he arose from where he lay with intent to inquire further into that matter. Now as he made some noise and bestirring himself, there came forth from that pavilion aforementioned a very hideous dwarf, who saluted him with all civility and with high respect. Then Sir Accolon said to the dwarf, Sirrah, who are you? Unto which the dwarf made reply,
Messire, I belong unto the lady of yonder pavilion, and she hath sent me to bid you welcome to this place, and to invite you in for to partake of a repast with her.
Ha! Quoth Sir Accolon, and how was it I came hither?
Sir, said the dwarf, I do not know, but when we looked forth this morning, we saw you lying here by the fountain side.
Then Sir Accolon made great marvel at that which had happened to him, and by he said, Who is thy lady? To which the dwarf replied,
She is Hight, the Lady Gawain of the fair hair, and she will be passingly glad of your company in her pavilion.
Upon this Sir Accolon arose, and having laved himself at the fountain, and so refreshed himself, he went with the dwarf unto the pavilion of that lady. And when he had come there, he saw that in the centre of the pavilion was a table of silver spread with a fair white cloth, and covered with very excellent food, for a man to break his fast withal. Now immediately Sir Accolon came into the pavilion, the curtains upon the further side thereof were parted, and there entered from a further chamber a very beautiful lady, and gave Sir Accolon welcome to that place. And Sir Accolon said to her, Lady, methinks thou art very civil to invite me thus into thy pavilion.
Nay, sir, said the lady, it took no great effort to be civil unto a knight so worthy as thou.
Then she said to Sir Accolon,
Sir, wilt thou sit here at the table with me and break thy fast?
At this Sir Accolon was very glad, for he was an hungered, and the beauty of the lady pleased him a very great deal, wherefore it afforded him a great joy for to be in her company. So they two sat at the table with a very cheerful and pleasant spirit, and the dwarf waited upon them. Now after Sir Accolon and the lady of the pavilion had broken their fasts, she spake to him in this wise,
Sir Knight, thou appearest to be a very strong and worthy lord, and one very well used to feats of arms and to prowess and battle.
To this Sir Accolon made reply,
Lady, it does not beseem me to bespeak of my own worth, but this much I may freely say. I have engaged in several affrays at arms, in such measure as a knight with belt and spurs may do, and I believe that both my friends and mine enemies have had reason to say that I have at all times done my devours to the best of my powers.
Then the damoiselle said,
I believe you are a very brave and worthy knight, and being such, you might be of service to a good worthy knight who is in sad need of such service as one knight may render unto another.
To this Sir Accolon said,
What is the service?
And the damoiselle replied,
I will tell thee. There is, dwelling not far from this place, a certain knight, hight Sir Ontzlake, who hath an elder brother, hight Sir Damas. This Sir Damas hath served Sir Ontzlake very ill in many ways, and hath deprived him of well nigh all of his patrimony, so that only a little is left to Sir Ontzlake of all the great possessions that were one time his father's. But even such a small holding as that, Sir Damas begrudges Sir Ontzlake, so that Sir Ontzlake must needs hold what he hath by such force of arms as he may himself maintain. Now, Sir Damas hath found himself a champion who is a man of a great deal of strength and prowess, and through this champion Sir Damas challenges Sir Ontzlake's right to hold even that small part of those lands which were one time his father's. Wherefore, if Sir Ontzlake would retain what is his, he must presently do battle therefor. Now this is a very sad case for Sir Ontzlake. For a short time since he was wounded by a spear at a tournament, and was pierced through both of his thighs, wherefore he is not now able to sit upon his horse and defend his rights against assault. Wherefore, meseems that a knight could have no better cause to show his prowess than in the defence of so sad a case as this.
So spake that lady, and to all she said Sir Accolon listened with great attention, and when she had ended, he said,
Lady, I would be indeed right willing to defend Sir Ontzlake's right, but lo, I have no armour, nor have I any arms to do battle withal.
Then that damoiselle smiled very kindly upon Sir Accolon, and she said to him,
Sir, Sir Ontzlake may easily fit thee with armour that shall be altogether to thy liking. And as for arms, I have in this pavilion a sword that hath but one other fellow in all the world.
Upon this she arose, and went back into that curtained recess from which she had come, and thence she presently returned, bringing a certain thing wrapped in a scarlet cloth. And she opened the cloth before Sir Accolon's eyes, and lo, that which she had there was King Arthur's sword, Excalibur, in his sheath. Then the damoiselle said, This sword shall be thine if thou wilt assume this quarrel upon behalf of Sir Ontzlake. Now, when Sir Accolon beheld that sword, he wist not what to think, and he said to himself,
Certes, either this is Excalibur, or else it is his twin brother.
Therewith he drew the blade from out of its sheath, and it shined with extraordinary splendour. Then Sir Accolon said,
I know not what to think for pure wonder, for this sword is indeed the very image of another sword I wot of.
When he so spake, that damoiselle smiled upon him again, and said,
I have heard tell that there is in this world another sword like to this.
Then Sir Accolon said,
Lady, to win this sword for myself, I would be willing to fight in any battle whatsoever.
And the damoiselle replied,
Then, if thou wilt fight this battle for Sir Ontzlake, thou art free to keep that sword for thine own.
At the which Sir Accolon was rejoiced beyond all measure of gladness. So it came about that by the wiles of Queen Morgana le Fay, King Arthur was brought to fight a battle unknowingly with a knight very much beloved by him, and that knight had Excalibur to use against his master. For all these things had come to pass through the cunning of Morgana le Fay. Now a fair field was prepared for that battle, in such a place as was convenient both to Sir Damas and to Sir Ontzlake, and thither they came upon the day assigned, each with his knight champion and his attendants. Sir Ontzlake being brought thither in a litter because of the sore wound in his thighs. Also, a great many other folk came to behold the combat, for the news thereof had gone forth to a great distance around about that place. So, all being in readiness, the two knights that were to do battle in that field were brought within the barriers of combat, each fully armed and each mounted upon a very good horse. Now King Arthur was clad all in armour of Sir Damas, and Sir Accolon was clad in armour that belonged to Sir Ontzlake, and the head of each was covered by his helmet, so that neither of those two knew the other. Then the herald came forth, and announced that the battle was toward, and each knight immediately put himself in readiness for the assault. Thereupon, the word for assault being given, the two rushed forth, each from his station, with such speed and fury that it was wonderful to behold. So they met in the midst of the course with a roar as of thunder, and the spear of each knight was burst all into small pieces unto the truncheon which he held in his hand. Upon this, each knight voided his horse with great skill and address, and allowed it to run at will in that field. And each threw aside the truncheon of his spear and drew his sword, and thereupon came the one against the other with the utmost fury of battle. It was at this time that Vivian came to that place upon the behest of Merlin, and she brought with her such a court and a state of beauty that a great many people took notice of her with great pleasure. So Vivian and her court took stand at the barriers whence they might behold all that was toward. And Vivian regarded those two knights, and she could not tell which was King Arthur and which was his enemy, wherefore she said,
Well, I will do as Merlin desired me to do, but I must wait and see this battle for a while ere I shall be able to tell which is King Arthur, for it would be a pity to cast my spells upon the wrong knight.
So these two knights came together in battle afoot, and first they foined, and then they both struck at the same time, and lo, the sword of King Arthur did not bite into the armour of Sir Accolon, but the sword of Sir Accolon bit very deeply into the armour of King Arthur, and wounded him so sorely that the blood ran down in great quantities into his armour. And after that they struck very often and very powerfully, and as it was at first, so it was afterward, for the sword of Sir Accolon ever bit into the armour of King Arthur, and the sword of King Arthur bit not at all into his enemy's armour. So in a little while it came that King Arthur's armour was stained all over with red, with the blood that flowed out from the great many wounds, and Sir Accolon bled not at all because of the sheath of Excalibur which he wore at his side. And the blood of King Arthur flowed down upon the ground, so that all the grass around about was ensanguined with it. So when King Arthur beheld how all the ground was wet with his own blood, and how his enemy bled not at all, he began to fear that he would die in that battle. Wherefore he said to himself, How is this? Hath the virtue departed out of Excalibur and his sheath? Were it not otherwise, I would think that the sword which cutteth me so sorely is Excalibur, and that this sword is not Excalibur. Upon this, a great despair of death came upon him, and he ran at Sir Accolon, and smote him so sore a blow upon the helm, that Sir Accolon nigh fell down upon the ground. But at that blow, the sword of King Arthur broke short off at the cross of the handle, and fell into the grass among the blood, and the pommel thereof, and the cross thereof was all that King Arthur held in his hand. Now at that blow Sir Accolon waxed very mad, so he ran at King Arthur with intent to strike him some dolorous blow. But when he saw that King Arthur was without weapon, he paused in his assault, and he said, Sir Knight, I see that thou art without weapon, and that thou hast lost a great deal of blood. Wherefore I demand thee to yield thyself unto me as recreant. Then King Arthur was again very much adread that his death was near to him. Yet because of his royalty, it was not possible for him to yield to any knight. So he said, Nay, Sir Knight, I may not yield myself unto thee, for I would liever die with honour than yield myself without honour. For though I lack a weapon, there are particular reasons why I may not lack worship. Wherefore, thou mayst slay me as I am without weapon, and that will be thy shame, and not my shame. Well, said Sir Accolon, as for the shame, I will not spare thee unless thou dost yield to me. And King Arthur said, I will not yield me. Thereupon Sir Accolon said, Then stand thou away from me, so that I may strike thee. And when King Arthur had done as Sir Accolon bade him, Sir Accolon smote him such a wonderful blow that the king fell down upon his knees. Then Sir Accolon raised Excalibur with intent to strike King Arthur again, and with that all the people who were there cried out upon him to spare so worshipful a knight. But Sir Accolon would not spare him. Then Vivian said unto herself,
Certes, that must be King Arthur who was so near to his death, and I do make my vow that it would be a great pity for him to die after he hath fought so fiercely. So when Sir Accolon raised his sword that second time with intent to strike his enemy, Vivian smote her hands with great force, and emitted at the same time a spell of such potency that it appeared to Sir Accolon upon that instant as though he had received some very powerful blow upon his arm. For with that spell his arm was benumbed all from his fingertips unto the hollow of his armpit,
and thereupon Excalibur fell out of Sir Accolon's arms and into the grass. Then King Arthur beheld the sword, and he perceived that it was Excalibur, and therewith he knew that he had been betrayed. Wherefore he cried out thrice, in a very loud voice, "Treason! Treason! Treason!" And with that he set his knee upon the blade, and before Sir Accolon could stay him, he seized it into his hands. Then it appeared to King Arthur that a great virtue had come into him because of that sword. Wherefore he arose from his knees, and ran at Sir Accolon, and smote him so sorely that the blade penetrated his armour to the depth of half a palm's breadth. And he smote him again and again, and Sir Accolon cried out in a loud voice, and fell down upon his hands and knees. Then King Arthur ran to him, and catched the sheath of Excalibur, and plucked it away from Sir Accolon, and flung it away, and thereupon the wounds of Sir Accolon burst out bleeding in great measure. Then King Arthur catched the helmet of Sir Accolon, and rushed it off his head with intent to slay him. Now because King Arthur was blinded with his own blood, he did not know Sir Accolon, wherefore he said, "Sir Knight, who art thou who hast betrayed me?" And Sir Accolon said, "I have not betrayed thee. I am Sir Accolon of Gaul, and am knight in good worship of King Arthur's court." But when King Arthur heard this, he made great outcry, and he said, "How is this? Know you who I am?" And Sir Accolon said, "Nay, I know you not." Then King Arthur said, "I am King Arthur, who am thy master." And upon this he took off his helmet, and Sir Accolon knew him. And when Sir Accolon beheld King Arthur, he swooned away, and lay like one dead upon the ground. And King Arthur said, "Take him hence." Then when those who were there were aware who King Arthur was, they burst over the barriers, and ran toward him with great outcry of pity. And King Arthur would have left this place, but upon that he also swooned away, because of the great issue of blood that had come from him. Wherefore all those who were round about took great sorrow, thinking that he was dying. Wherefore they bewailed themselves without stint. Then came Vivien out into that field, and she said, "Let me have him, for I believe I shall be able to cure his hurts." So she commanded that 2 litters should be brought, and she placed King Arthur in one of the litters, and she placed Sir Accolon in the other, and she bore them both away to a priory of nuns that was at no great distance from that place. So when Vivien had come there, she searched the wounds of King Arthur, and bathed them with a very precious balsam, so that they immediately began to heal. As for Sir Accolon, she would not have to do with his wounds, but let one of her attendants bathe him and dress his hurts. Now when the next morning had come, King Arthur was so much recovered that he was able to arise, though very weak and sick, nigh unto death. So he got up from his couch, and he would not permit anyone to stay him, and he wrapped a cloak about him, and went to the place where Sir Accolon lay. When he had come there, he questioned Sir Accolon very narrowly, and Sir Accolon told him all that had happened to him after he had left that ship, and how the strange damsel had given him a sword for to fight with. So when King Arthur heard all that Sir Accolon had to tell him, he said, "Messire, I think that thou art not to be blamed in this matter, but I much do fear me that there is treachery here to compass my ruin." Then he went out from that place, and he found Vivien, and he said to her, "Damsel, I beseech thee to dress the wounds of that knight with the same balsam that thou didst use to dress my wounds."
"Lord," said Vivien, "I cannot do so, for I have no more of that balsam."
But what she said was false, for she did have more of that balsam, but she did not choose to use it upon Sir Accolon. So that afternoon Sir Accolon died of his wounds, which he had received in his battle with King Arthur. And that day King Arthur summoned Sir Dumas and Sir Ontzlake into his presence, and they came and stood before him, so filled with the terror of his majesty that they had not the power to stand, but fell down upon their knees unto him. Then King Arthur said, "I will pardon you, for ye knew not what ye did. But thou, Sir Dumas, I believe art a very false and treasonable knight, wherefore I shall deprive thee of all thy possessions, but that one single castle which thy brother had, and that I shall give unto thee. But all thy possessions I shall give unto Sir Ontzlake. And I shall further ordain that thou shalt never hereafter have the right to ride upon any horse but a palfrey, for thou art not worthy to ride upon a courser, as a true knight hath a right to do. And I command it of thee that thou shalt presently liberate all those knights who were my companions in captivity, and thou shalt recompense them for all the injury that thou hast done to them, according as it shall be decided by a court of chivalry. Therewith he dismissed those 2 knights, and they were very glad that he had dealt so mercifully with them. Conclusion. Now shortly after that combat betwixt King Arthur and Sir Accolon, the news thereof was brought to Queen Morgana le Fay, and the next day thereafter she heard that Sir Accolon was dead, and she wist not how it could be that her designs could have been so miscarried. Then she was a doubt as to how much King Arthur might know of her treachery, so she said to herself, I will go and see my brother the king, and if he is aware of my treason, I will beseech him to pardon my transgression. So having made diligent inquiry as to where it was that King Arthur lay, she gathered together her court of knights and esquires, and went thitherward. So she came to that place upon the 5th day after the battle, and when she had come there, she asked of those who were in attendance what cheer the king had. They answered her, He is asleep and must not be disturbed. To the which Queen Morgana le Fay replied, No matter, I am not to be forbidden, for I must presently see him and speak with him. So they did not dare to stay her, because she was the king's sister. So Queen Morgana went into the chamber where the king lay, and he did not awaken at her coming. Then Queen Morgana was filled full of hatred and a great desire for revenge, wherefore she said to herself, I will take Excalibur and his shield, and will carry them away with me to Avalon, and my brother shall never see them again. So she went very softly to where King Arthur lay, and she looked upon him as he slept, and perceived that he had Excalibur beside him, and that he held the handle of the sword in his hand while he slept. Then Queen Morgana said, Alas for this! For if I try to take Excalibur away from him, haply he will awake, and he will slay me for my treason. Then she looked and perceived where the sheath of Excalibur lay at the foot of the couch. So she took the sheath of Excalibur very softly, and she wrapped it up in her mantle, and she went out thence, and King Arthur did not awaken at her going. So Queen Morgana came out from the king's chamber, and she said to those in attendance, Do not awaken the king, for he sleepeth very soundly. Therewith she mounted her horse, and went her way from that place. Now, after a considerable while, King Arthur awoke, and he looked for the sheath of Excalibur, but he perceived that it was gone. Wherefore he said immediately, Who hath been here? They in attendance made answer, Queen Morgana le Fay had been here, and she came in and saw you and went her way without waking you. Then King Arthur's heart misgave him, and he said, I fear me that she hath dealt treacherously with me from the beginning to the end of these adventures. Whereupon he arose, and summoned all his knights and esquires, and mounted his horse for pursuit of Queen Morgana, although he was still passing sick, and faint from his sore wounds and loss of blood. Now, as the king was about ready to depart, Vivien came to him where he was, and said, Lord, take me with thee, for if thou dost not do so, thou wilt never recover Excalibur his sheath, nor wilt thou ever overtake Queen Morgana le Fay. And King Arthur said, Come with me, damsel, in God's name. So Vivien went with him in pursuit of Queen Morgana. Now by and by, as she fled, Queen Morgana le Fay looked behind her, and therewith she perceived that Vivien was with the party of King Arthur, wherefore her heart failed her, and she said, I fear me that I am now altogether ruined, for I have aided that damsel to acquire such knowledge of magic that I shall have no spells to save myself from her counterspell. But at any rate it shall be that King Arthur shall never have the sheath of Excalibur again, for to help him in his hour of need. Now at that time they were passing beside the margin of a lake of considerable size. So Queen Morgana le Fay took the sheath of Excalibur in both her hands, and swung it by its belt above her head, and threw it a great distance out into the water. Then, lo, a very singular miracle occurred. For there suddenly appeared a woman's arm out of the water, and it was cloud in white, and it was adorned with many bracelets, and the hand of the arm catched the sheath of Excalibur and drew it underneath the water, and no one ever beheld that sheath again. So the sheath of Excalibur was lost, and that was a grievous thing for King Arthur in after time, as you may sometime read. Now after Queen Morgana le Fay had thus thrown the sheath of Excalibur into the lake, she went on a little farther to where was a very lonely place, with a great many rocks and stones lying about upon the ground. And when she had come to that place, she exercised very potent spells of magic that Merlin had taught her. So, by means of those spells, she transformed herself and all of her court, and all of their horses, into large round stones of divers sizes. Then, in a little while, came King Arthur to that place with his knights and esquires, and he was exceedingly heavy of heart, for he had beheld from a great distance how Queen Morgana le Fay had thrown the sheath of Excalibur into that lake. Now, when the king and his court had come to that spot, the damsel Vivien called out upon him to stop, and she said to him, "Lord, dost thou behold all those great round stones?" "Yea," said the king, "I do see them." Then Vivien said, "Lo, those stones are Queen Morgana le Fay and the court who were with her. For this magic that she hath done to change herself and them into stones was a certain thing that Merlin had taught her. Now I myself know that magic, and I also know how to remove that magic at my will. Therefore, if thou wilt promise to immediately punish that wicked woman for all her treason by depriving her of her life, then will I bring her back into her true shape again, so that thou mayst have her in thy power." Then King Arthur looked upon Vivien with great displeasure, and he said, "Damsel, thou hast a cruel heart. Thou thyself hast suffered no injury at the hands of Queen Morgana. Wherefore then wouldst thou have me slay her? Now, for all thou hast done for me, I would be very much affronted with thee. As for her, I forgive her all of this, and I shall forgive her again, and yet again, if she sin against me. For her mother was my mother, and the blood which flows in her veins, and in my veins, cometh from the same fountainhead, wherefore I will do no evil thing against her. Let us return again whence we came." Then Vivien looked upon King Arthur very bitterly, and she laughed with great scorn, and said, "Thou art both a fool and a dotard." And therewith she vanished from the sight of all. And after that, because King Arthur had rebuked her for her wickedness in the presence of others, she hated him even more than Morgana le Fay had hated him. Some time after that, King Arthur heard how Merlin had been beguiled by Vivien, and he sorrowed with great bitterness that Merlin was lost unto the world in that wise. And so ended the story of the passing of Merlin.
Hey, you want to buy something? You can check the description for my books and audiobooks. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.